Hey there, Ron Sullivan, your online hitting consultant. Thought today I would talk a little bit about Brinson, ranked the number 4 prospect by ESPN in the Texas Rangers farm system, and most importantly, he's a center fielder, and we need it. Right, so I'm a Ranger fan, so admittedly that's why I'm putting the focus on Brinson. But I wanted to talk about some things that I think are applicable whenever we're talking about the changes that our players need to make and so forth, and some of the things that I think that we need to be really careful of as we're making those changes. 2014 on the right, 2015 on the left. I want to point out some of the differences that I think that have made a big difference in his season. 2015 is his best season in the minors by far, and I think why he's getting a lot of attention. And I think the most significant change that he made that really has created more production is the way that he drops into his weight shift, where his hands and his barrel position are. Now, I'm not, I don't have any rules on where this barrel position ultimately is. I think the biggest change that Brinson made here, where his bottom hand arm or front arm were positioned when he dropped in. Before, it would kind of float up kind of near his collarbone, and ultimately I think that the change that he made created a little bit better overall connection where he wasn't going to allow his hands to fall out of sequence. Now, I know that Brinson in this position could still hit a lot of baseballs, right? But I think that he's created a little more consistency because his hands, if his timing or his sequence was off, his hands were going to get left behind because his body was going to be turning and kind of leaving things behind. And so that's the most, I think the biggest change that he made was getting his hands and arms in a position where he could get right to where he needed to go. Look, this was a ball that he was obviously trying to put on the ground in 2015. But nonetheless, that shorter position is, I think, what ultimately got him better production overall. Now, I'll talk about another change that I think that he's made that I think is still missing the point. Nowadays with video, we see a lot of times with the players at the highest level, you'll see that this stride distance or weight shift position is not too out of the ordinary. In that, for a lot of people, you see this for the first time, you go, wow, he's really wide. And this is something you see a lot of times with players at this level. It looks a lot like Manny Machado, Donaldson, obviously, and Bautista, and those guys. They get really long here, but obviously it's under control. What Brinson, I think, missed in his change was he never used the ground as a force to unload his swing. His legs were going through the motions of what good leg mechanics were, right? But I think that he missed the point somewhere along the way where he never learned to use the ground. Someone probably showed him pictures of getting his back knee underneath him a little bit more like Donaldson, or I don't know, something to do with his back leg angle. But the emphasis should have been more on how he used his front side when he landed. There's something they're measuring now. It's called ground force. You see it on Sports Science with Miguel Cabrera, where they're measuring pounds per force that's going into the ground as a player unloads the swing. But what we normally see with players is we hear a lot about lower half starting the upper half. We're getting farther and farther away from the point the more mechanical we make this move, because we're looking at back leg angles, we're looking at all that stuff, and really the main consideration should be in how much force or how much leverage a player gets when he drops in here. This back leg, my belief, is a response to firm leverage in the front side, and that's ultimately how we're going to release our upper half to our full extent, and not how much we release our back leg. I see more and more, I do a lot of evaluations of players jumping off of this back foot because they're trying to get a good leg angle, or we're trying to go in such an opposite direction of squishing the bug that we're just creating another extreme. Now, this move right here is not impossible to hit with, but somewhere along the line, someone noticed, either Brinson or somebody with video up in the organization, said, hey, maybe we can make this better by shortening things up. And look, I don't think it was a bad idea, but what I think that they've done is they've still continue to miss the point. Now, you'll see here in this frame, I think a lot of people will look at this, and this is what I think they were aiming for, is they said, we're going to get that lower half started in such a way that your upper half's still going to be back, and then we're going to unload on the ball. Now, this is something he was obviously trying to stay on top of and put the ball on the ground, but nonetheless, you can see again a manufactured move with the lower half to start the upper half. Again, absent of ground force, and it's against the laws of physics as far as I'm concerned. When you're trying to do something really athletic, sometimes this move is a lot more natural than what players make it. They're trying to do something because on video they saw a guy with his leg tucked in underneath him. But when we tuck our leg in underneath us in order to manufacture this, I think that we just lose something. Is it impossible to hit that way? No. But I want to give a good example here of what I think it describes exactly what should happen in the process. Now, Mike Trout, obviously one of the best hitters in the game. All right, and Mike Trout is not someone that the hitting gurus online are going to be able to fit within their template of good hitters, and so you won't see very many guys diagram this swing because there are certain things that they'll say, oh, he needs work in this area and all that. Again, best hitter in the world, and these still guys are talking about how he needs help. The reality is if you watch what Mike Trout does naturally and how he unloads the swing, he gives us a really great example of what our players need to be focused on other than, hey, what are we doing with our back foot and our back leg angle? For instance, if you see here, as Mike Trout drops in, something you don't see very much these days from our kiddos, that's for sure, is when they get to heel plant with their front foot, you can see that Mike Trout's back heel is still in the ground for the most part, and he's really trying to stay grounded, okay, and then he's going to use the ground, that front side leverage to unload the swing. And that back leg is responding to that leverage. That's to me how you ultimately unload the lower half, is not by doing something with your lower half, but by using the ground to unload the lower half. But we've gotten so caught up in measuring, oh, look at this back angle, and look, he's not squishing the bug, and my player's squishing the bug, so I need him to start doing something with his back leg. No, your player didn't understand ground force, right? They're not using the ground to unload, they're using their body's rotation or spinning to turn their body, right? And so instead of manufacturing a back leg move, understand the laws of gravity, understand ground force, and how players should unload, and then you're going to see, and we can stop measuring back leg angles and so forth and say, oh, okay, this player's using the ground to his full potential. Now you're going to see guys with different releases of the backside. Bryce Harper picks his foot up, but you cannot look at Bryce Harper's swing and say he doesn't use the ground to do that. He does. He's not using his hips to make that happen. He's using the ground to help that happen. Okay? And this is a great example, I think, of players that continue to miss the point with what we are trying to do. We're trying to be mechanical with the lower half instead of using, again, a natural move to unload the swing. And so guys like this can get away with it, right? He's bigger, stronger. He uses his hands better than most people in the world, right? And that's the reality. He can still get away with it, but is his maximum potential being laid out there? No, he's still wanting to do something because, again, the power of video these days really can work against us if we don't understand what it is that we're looking at. And I think a lot of baseball guys are in clubhouses looking at video, and they may know the swing very well, but they have no idea how to interpret what's happening frame for frame at 10,000 frames per second. They know what they did, they know what it felt like, but they don't know, okay, the unwinding of the lower half really isn't a bad idea. It's not a good idea. We want to use the ground to unload the swing. So yada, yada, yada. And I think that Brinson's going to be a really nice player. And I think that when somebody comes along and says, hey, maybe you can do this process a little bit more simple than what you're making it. You're making it a manufactured move. Let's try doing it a little bit different way. And I think that he's going to ultimately be really the hitter that the Texas Rangers are hoping for when he comes up. All right, guys, thanks.